Picture this: you arrest a black woman at a gas station, ignore her when she tells you she's a federal judge, laugh in her face, book her anyway. Then 38 hours later, you walk into court for your own civil rights trial and she's the one wearing the robe. That's exactly what happened to Harris County Sheriff's deputies Michael Torres and Brandon Hayes. And what they didn't know was that Judge Lauren Whitaker had just spent the worst night of her life saying goodbye to her dying mother. If you're ready to see institutional racism taken down, smash that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe right now. You won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops picking on the wrong person and finding out the hard way. Let me know in the comments if this one hit you. Now let's break down how a respected federal judge ended up in handcuffs at a gas station, and how two deputies ended up facing her on the bench less than 2 days later. Lauren Whitaker never planned to spend Saturday night in a jail cell. At 51 years old, the federal magistrate judge for the Southern District of Texas had spent 26 years building a reputation for fairness, surgical precision, and unshakable calm. She had presided over major drug trafficking conspiracies, complex RICO cases, high-stakes civil rights litigation. She had stared down high-powered defense attorneys and Department of Justice prosecutors without flinching. But at 2:41 a.m. on a cold January morning, none of that mattered. The ICU family waiting room at Memorial Hermann Hospital in Katy smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. Lauren sat in a stiff vinyl chair that squeaked every time she shifted. Her mother's favorite navy blue pashmina lay folded across her lap. Dr. Nguyen had just delivered the news with quiet, practiced compassion. Hours, maybe a day. The pneumonia had won. Evelyn Whitaker, 74, retired third-grade teacher, longtime member of Greater Grace Baptist Church, and the woman who worked nights at the post office to send her daughter to Howard Law, was fading. Lauren hadn't cried yet. She learned early in her legal career that tears were a liability in courtrooms. Every emotion could be used against you. But sitting alone under that harsh fluorescent light, watching the second hand crawl around the clock face, she felt something deep inside her chest finally crack open. She had thrown on whatever she could grab 17 hours earlier when the hospital called. Black leggings, an old Howard Law hoodie with worn cuffs, white sneakers. Her hair, normally pulled into a tight professional bun under her judicial robe, hung loose around her shoulders. No makeup, no jewelry except the small gold cross her mother gave her the day she was sworn in as a federal judge. She looked nothing like the magistrate who had sentenced a corrupt police chief to 14 years just 5 weeks earlier. The memory surfaced without warning. She was 10 years old, sitting in the back of her father's Ford F-150 after a traffic stop on a quiet street in Missouri City. The officer ordered her father, Raymond Whitaker, to step out to show his hands to explain why he was in this area at night. Lauren watched her father's jaw tighten as he handed over his Army veteran ID, his voice steady even as humiliation burned in his eyes. 4 months later, Raymond Whitaker was found beaten in a ditch off FM 2234. The case went nowhere. No suspects, no arrests, the file was quietly shelved. Afterward, her mother held her tight in the kitchen of their small apartment on Chimney Rock. Evelyn made a promise without words, one Lauren carried in her bones. One day you're going to make the system answer to people like us. Lauren kept that promise. First in her family to go to law school. 12 years as a federal public defender, then appointed magistrate judge at 44 by unanimous consent of the district court judges. She had made the system work. She had made her mother proud. Now Evelyn lay in room 417, machines breathed for her. A morphine drip dulled the pain. The nurse gently suggested Lauren go home, get some rest. The doctors had done everything possible. It was only a matter of time. Lauren stood slowly, knees aching after hours in that unforgiving chair. She folded the pashmina, set it carefully on the seat, and walked down the bright, sterile hallway to her mother's room. The monitors beeped in steady rhythm. Evelyn's chest rose and fell mechanically. Lauren leaned down, kissed her mother's forehead, whispered words meant only for the two of them. Then she left. The January air hit her like a slap when she stepped outside. 3:08 a.m., the hospital parking lot stretched wide and nearly empty under glaring sodium lights. Her black Lexus RX sat 5 rows back, windows already glazed with frost. Lauren walked slowly, each breath forming small clouds. She needed gas. The low fuel light had been on for the last 25 minutes. She couldn't think about tomorrow, couldn't face the call that was coming. She could only focus on the next small task. The Shell station on Aminas 10 just west of Katy was one of those 24-hour spots, 4 pumps under a bright canopy, a small convenience store with lottery ads and barred windows, empty except for one semi-truck idling near the diesel pump. Lauren pulled up to pump 4, swiped her card, and started fueling. The numbers climbed slowly. 11 gallons, 13, the cold seeped through her hoodie. She should have grabbed a jacket from the trunk, but the thought felt too heavy. Headlights swept across the lot. A Harris County Sheriff's cruiser rolled in slow and deliberate and parked at an angle that blocked her SUV. Lauren's stomach clenched. She knew this sequence. She had seen it in depositions, in trial testimony, in the stories her father used to tell, the casual power play, the manufactured pretext. Two deputies stepped out. The first was broad-shouldered, mid-40s, buzz-cut, jaw set like he chewed nails for breakfast. His nameplate read Torres. The second was younger, leaner, eyes flicking nervously between Lauren and his partner, Hayes. Torres walked up with the loose confidence of someone who rarely heard the word no. His hand rested near his belt, fingers tapping the radio. He told her she matched a description. Possible stolen vehicle. He needed to see ID. Lauren set the nozzle back in the cradle. The pump read 15.6 gallons, $58.40. She turned to face him fully, voice calm and clear. She identified herself as a United States magistrate judge for the Southern District of Texas and reached slowly into her pocket for her credentials. The slim leather folio held her judicial ID, her bar card, and a business card with the federal courthouse seal in gold foil. She opened it, letting the light catch the official emblems. Torres took the folio, glanced at it, then let out a sharp, mocking laugh. He looked at Hayes, then back at Lauren, grin widening. He said sure she was a federal judge, and he was the mayor of Houston. He snapped a photo of the ID with his phone, handed the folio back, and pulled out his handcuffs. Lauren's mind went cold and focused, the same clarity she felt during tense sentencing hearings. She stated clearly and calmly that she was a sitting federal magistrate, that this detention lacked probable cause, and that she was invoking her Fourth Amendment rights. Her voice carried across the empty pumps, steady and even. Torres ignored her. He told her to turn around, hands behind her back. The cuffs clicked shut too tight, metal digging into skin. The pat-down was slow, public, designed to degrade. Hayes stood watch, eyes scanning the lot. From somewhere near the semi-truck, a phone camera light glowed faintly, someone filming. They walked her to the cruiser. Torres placed his hand on her head and guided her into the back seat with practiced force. The door slammed shut. The cage partitions smelled like old sweat and cheap pine air freshener. As the cruiser pulled out of the shell lot, Lauren pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Constitutional language ran through her mind like a lifeline, the words she first studied in law school, the words that had meant everything to her father. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. The Harris County Detention Center sat squat and gray on the outskirts of Katy, surrounded by chain link and razor wire. They processed Lauren in a harshly lit intake room that reeked of bleach and old sweat. A young booking officer, barely 25, still with acne scars, examined her judicial ID with growing confusion. He looked from the card to Lauren, then to Torres, then back again. Torres leaned in. "Book her," he said flatly. "Fingerprints, mugshot, property inventory." They logged her credentials as personal effects, sealed them in a brown envelope. Then they walked her down a fluorescent corridor to a holding cell. 6 by 8 feet, concrete bench bolted to the wall, stainless steel toilet in the corner. The door clanged shut with a finality that echoed in her chest. Lauren sat on the bench, wrists still throbbing from the too tight cuffs. She closed her eyes and pictured her mother's face, the gentle rise and fall of the ventilator, the promise she had made in that tiny kitchen on Chimney Rock 35 years earlier. Time warped inside the cell. No windows, no clock, just the distant clang of doors, muffled voices, the occasional shout. Footsteps approached. A slot in the door slid open. A corrections officer's face appeared, older, tired eyes. His voice was low, almost gentle. "Ma'am, the hospital called. Your mother passed about 20 minutes ago. They said to tell you they're very sorry." Lauren didn't move, didn't speak. She sat perfectly still while grief arrived like a physical weight, pressing the air from her lungs. The fluorescent tube overhead buzzed. The world narrowed to the cold concrete beneath her and the hollow space where her mother used to be. They released her at first light. A shift lieutenant, graying hair, deep-set eyes, face tight with barely contained anger, appeared at the cell door. He unlocked it himself. He apologized formally, voice clipped. He confirmed her identity through a supervisor's call to the federal courthouse. He handed over the names of the arresting deputies. He promised an internal affairs investigation would begin immediately. Lauren signed the property release form with a steady hand, retrieved her credentials, and walked out into the pale January dawn. The Shell station was 6 miles away. She opened the Uber app with numb fingers, waited on the curb in the cold, rode back in silence. Her Lexus still sat where she'd left it, frost now melted, a soggy parking ticket fluttering under the wiper from the overnight stay. She climbed in, started the engine, and drove home through quiet streets while, unknown to her, cell phone video of the arrest was already spreading online. Clips bounced from group chat to group chat, racking up views by the thousands. People who didn't yet know her name were sharing outrage. She pulled into her driveway in Sugar Land at 7:12 a.m. Before she could reach the front door, her phone rang. Chief Judge Elena Ramirez's voice was urgent, professional, no nonsense. "Lauren, we've got an emergency. Judge Harlan collapsed last night, massive heart attack. He's in surgery. We need someone to take the bench this morning. Civil rights trial, high profile. You're the only magistrate available. Can you be here in 90 minutes? Lauren leaned against the car, phone pressed to her ear. What's the case caption? Rivers v. Torres et al. She knew it instantly. Excessive force, racial profiling. The defendants, Harris County Sheriff's deputies Michael Torres and Brandon Hayes. Lauren stood in her driveway, frost still clinging to the grass, and felt something shift inside her. Not rage, not triumph, just a cold, crystalline clarity. "I'll be there," she said. She went inside, showered quickly, pinned her hair into its usual neat bun, and put on her black judicial robe. The weight of the fabric felt like armor. The Bob Casey United States Courthouse rose 20 stories above downtown Houston, its glass and granite facade catching the weak winter sun. News vans already lined Smith Street, satellite trucks. Reporters shouting questions at anyone in a suit who approached the entrance. The Shell Station video had gone viral overnight. Local stations led with it at 6 a.m. National outlets picked it up by 7. Hashtags were trending. Number judge in cuffs, number Harris County Sheriff, number justice now. Lauren entered through the judge's secured garage entrance. She walked the marble corridors with measured steps, robe billowing slightly, carrying no visible trace of the night before. She had long ago learned to keep grief in a separate compartment, one you opened only in private. Courtroom 8C filled fast. The gallery was packed, spectators, activists, reporters claiming every front row seat. At the plaintiff's table sat Marcus Rivers, a 42-year-old Black Army veteran in a dark suit, the left side of his face still carrying faint scars from the incident that brought everyone here. His attorney, sharp-eyed litigator Sophia Morales, reviewed notes with quiet intensity. At the defense table, Michael Torres and Brandon Hayes sat beside their lawyer, a seasoned police misconduct specialist known for leaning hard on qualified immunity and procedural defenses. The deputies wore civilian suits, faces schooled into careful neutrality, the practiced blankness of men who had survived depositions and settlements before. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. Lauren entered from chambers, ascended the steps to the bench, arranged her files with deliberate precision. She surveyed the room, gallery, counsel tables, parties, then let her gaze settle on the defense table. Torres saw her first. His face went slack, blood draining as if someone pulled a plug. Hayes followed his partner's stare. His mouth actually fell open, a small involuntary sound escaping before he clamped it shut. Lauren allowed the silence to stretch. Let the recognition sink in. Let the moment harden into something permanent. Then she spoke, voice clear, measured, carrying the full weight of judicial authority. For the record, the court discloses that approximately 38 hours ago, I was detained by the defendants at a Shell station on Interstate 10. The detention was later determined to be without probable cause. I was released following verification of my identity. I consider this fact relevant to these proceedings and place it on the record to ensure full transparency. The defense attorney shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor, motion for recusal. This constitutes clear bias and personal involvement. We cite 28 U.S.C. Section 455, Canon 2 of the Code of Conduct. Lauren raised a hand, cutting him off without raising her voice. Motion denied. She cited Leike v. United States. Mere prior adverse rulings or personal knowledge do not automatically require recusal. She cited Fifth Circuit precedent allowing judges to preside over cases involving their own unlawful arrests when the arrest itself forms part of a pattern of misconduct. Her reasoning was tight, citation-heavy, delivered with the calm precision of someone who had anticipated every counterargument. Trial will proceed, she said simply. Marcus Rivers took the stand first. Shoulders squared like the soldier he once was, though his hands trembled slightly. He described the traffic stop on a quiet Sunday evening. No infraction cited, order to exit the vehicle. Escalation when he asked why. Torres knee on his neck, face ground into asphalt, the crack of his cheekbone fracturing, Hayes watching while pressure continued for 7 full minutes. Bodycam footage that conveniently corrupted. Sophia Morales introduced exhibits methodically. Medical records, fractured zygomatic arch. ER photos showing Marcus's face swollen almost beyond recognition. The incident report describing the encounter as minimal force, routine stop. Then came the screenshots. A digital forensics expert had recovered deleted texts from a group chat of 14 deputies, including Torres and Hayes. The messages scrolled across the courtroom screens. 3 tonight, all DWB. Quota's looking good this month lol memes mocking thugs in nice cars. The jury 8 women 4 men stared at the monitors. A black woman in the front row wiped her eyes. An older white man in the back shook his head slowly, jaw tight. Next, the night manager of the 24-hour diner across from the Shell station testified. He'd turned over security footage after seeing the news. The video played, crisp angle, good lighting, Lauren at the pump, cruiser blocking her exit, handcuffs clicking, pat down. Then Torres and Hayes by their cruiser afterward, fist bumping, grinning like they'd won something. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Lauren let the moment breathe, letting the jury absorb it. Sophia Morales called Brandon Hayes as an adverse witness. He took the stand pale, gripping the rail. She started soft timeline procedure then pivoted hard. Deputy Hayes, department policy requires body cameras to be activated during every enforcement contact, correct? Yes. And Mr. Rivers's stop was the camera activated, a long pause. Hayes's eyes flicked to Torres to his lawyer back to Morales, silence stretched. Then Hayes broke. The words spilled out fast, almost desperate. He admitted deleting portions of the Rivers body cam footage. Admitted falsifying the report at Torres' direction. Described the unwritten quota system, higher numbers expected in certain zip codes, certain demographics easier to work. He detailed the group chat, the culture of protection, the years of looking the other way. His own attorney tried to object to stop him. Hayes kept going as if a dam had burst inside him. The courtroom sat in stunned quiet. Michael Torres took the stand next. Defiance was carved into every line of his posture, shoulders back, chin up, eyes hard. He wore the same practiced composure he'd used in countless internal affairs interviews and civil depositions. His attorney led him through a carefully scripted direct examination. The dangers of patrol work, split-second decisions, the stress of high-crime areas, the need to maintain control during stops. Torres insisted every action in the Rivers incident had been justified, every use of force reasonable and within policy. Sophia Morales rose for cross-examination. She approached slowly, heels clicking on the marble floor, voice calm but edged like a scalpel. Deputy Torres, you received annual training on constitutional rights and departmental policy regarding racial profiling, correct? Yes. And part of that training covers the Fourth Amendment prohibition on unreasonable seizures. Yes. Morales introduced Defense Exhibit 14, a training manual Torres himself had helped revise 2 years earlier. She read aloud from page 47. Officers shall exercise heightened scrutiny in neighborhoods exhibiting demographic indicators consistent with higher criminal activity. She paused, let the words hang. Can you explain to the jury what those demographic indicators typically include? Torres shifted. High crime stats, repeat calls for service, known gang activity. Does that list ever include race or ethnicity? No, ma'am. Morales clicked to the next slide. A screenshot from the same group chat Hayes had already confessed to. A message from Torres, timestamped 3 months before the Rivers stop. Another one driving while black in the suburbs. Easy money tonight. The jury stirred. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Torres' jaw tightened. Morales continued without raising her voice. Deputy Torres, do you believe black individuals belong in certain parts of Harris County unless they have a specific reason to be there? The courtroom went dead silent. Torres' face flushed red. He leaned into the microphone. People belong where they have legitimate business. I don't have anything against anybody, but yeah, if someone doesn't look like they belong, we're gonna check. The words detonated. The gallery erupted, gasps, shouts, reporters typing furiously. The bailiff called for order twice. Lauren gavelled once, sharp and final, restoring quiet. Sophia Morales rested her case. During the afternoon break, Lauren made an unusual ruling from the bench. The court will temporarily step aside for the remainder of today's proceedings. Senior Judge Robert Callahan will preside over the evidentiary phase involving my own detention. I will return to the bench for closing arguments and jury instructions tomorrow. She left the robe in chambers, changed back into the clothes she'd worn that night, now released from evidence, and walked into the courtroom as a witness. Under oath, she testified in the same measured tone she used for bench rulings. She described the Shell station, the cruiser blocking her exit, Torres dismissing her credentials with laughter, the too tight cuffs, the public pat-down, the ride to the detention center. And then, the moment the corrections officer slid open the slot and told her Evelyn had passed 20 minutes earlier. She spoke without visible emotion, each detail clinical, precise, documented. She established the pattern, the casual authority, the manufactured pretext, the deliberate humiliation. The same methodology Torres had used on Marcus Rivers, on others whose names appeared in the recovered texts. Sophia Morales introduced one final exhibit. A paralegal team had conducted deep forensic review of Torres and Hayes' arrest records going back 20 years, buried in a 2001 cold case file, an aggravated assault. A black man named Raymond Whitaker, beaten unconscious and left in a ditch off Farm to Market Road 2234. Investigating deputies, rookies Michael Torres and Brandon Hayes. The file showed cursory interviews, no follow-up on witnesses, evidence logs with missing chain of custody entries. Case closed in 90 days, officially unsolved. Raymond Whitaker had been Lauren's father. The revelation landed like a shockwave. The courtroom froze, reporters scribbled at triple speed, spectators whispered. The jury sat rigid, eyes wide. Lauren remained on the stand, hands folded, face composed, while 40 years of history unspooled in public record. The child in the back of the pickup, the silent promise in the kitchen, the decades of work that brought her to this bench. The night she said goodbye to her last living parent, while two deputies fist-bumped over another successful stop. Judge Callahan called a brief recess. Lauren stepped down, returned to chambers, changed back into her robe, and resumed her place on the bench as if nothing had happened. The jury retired to deliberate at 2:15 p.m. Instructions covered excessive force, racial profiling, municipal liability under Monell, qualified immunity, and punitive damages. They were told to consider whether the deputies' actions were part of a pattern or practice. 4 hours and 20 minutes later, the jury returned. The foreperson, a middle-aged Latina woman who had watched every minute of testimony with quiet intensity, stood when called. The courtroom held its breath. We, the jury, find for the plaintiff, Marcus Rivers, on all counts. On the excessive force claim against deputies Torres and Hayes, liable. On the racial profiling claim, liable. Compensatory damages for medical expenses, lost wages, pain, and suffering. $620,000. Punitive damages, $18,400,000, allocated $9,200,000 per deputy. Total award, $19,020,000. The gallery exploded, cheers, sobs, hugs. Marcus Rivers dropped his head into his hands. Sophia Morales placed a steady hand on his shoulder. Reporters bolted for the doors, phones already live streaming. Lauren gavelled for order, then addressed the courtroom. In addition to the monetary judgment, the court orders the following equitable relief, effective immediately. Deputies Torres and Hayes are suspended without pay pending criminal referral to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. Harris County Sheriff's Office shall implement department-wide always-on body cameras with automatic cloud upload to an independent third-party server. Creation of a civilian oversight board with subpoena power and independent investigative authority. Appointment of a federal monitor to oversee policy reform for no less than 7 years. All training materials authored or co-authored by Deputy Torres shall be removed from department use. Both deputies shall complete full constitutional policing recertification before any future law enforcement employment, though the court notes such employment appears unlikely. She paused, letting the words settle. The Constitution binds every officer who takes the oath. When that oath is violated through systemic racial profiling, evidence tampering, or deliberate indifference, it is not merely misconduct, it is a betrayal of public trust. The badge carries authority, yes. It also carries accountability. When accountability is evaded, the court must enforce it. Court adjourned at 6:52 p.m. The aftermath unfolded in waves, each one bigger than the last. Within hours of the verdict, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened a formal investigation into Harris County Sheriff's Office practices. Federal prosecutors moved fast. Brandon Hayes, already broken on the stand, signed a cooperation agreement the next week. He pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts: deprivation of rights under color of law 18 U.S.C. Section 242, and conspiracy to obstruct justice through evidence tampering. The plea included 3 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years supervised release. After release, Hayes quietly enrolled in night classes at the University of Houston downtown, majoring in public administration. Years later, he became a paid trainer for police departments across Texas, using his own case files, with names redacted, to teach new recruits about implicit bias, constitutional limits on force, and what happens when departmental culture overrides the law. He never wore a badge again. Michael Torres took a different path. He hired a high-profile media consultant and launched a public relations counteroffensive. He gave interviews to conservative podcasts and cable news segments, framing himself as a victim of woke judicial activism and anti-police hysteria. He claimed the viral video was selectively edited, that the group chat messages were taken out of context, that qualified immunity should have protected him. The strategy imploded almost immediately. The Shell station footage looped endlessly on CNN, MSNBC, and local affiliates. The recovered texts were read aloud on primetime shows. Public outrage didn't fade, it intensified. Sponsors dropped his podcast appearances. His GoFundMe for legal fees was shut down after violating terms on hate speech content. Within 6 weeks, Torres resigned from the sheriff's office to avoid termination proceedings. He lost his pension in related civil forfeitures. He moved to a small town outside the county, took a job in private security, low-level site supervision, and largely disappeared from public view. The Harris County Sheriff's Office faced court-ordered reforms that reshaped the department from the ground up. The new Civilian Oversight Board launched operations within 5 months. It had real teeth. Subpoena power, independent investigators, authority to review every use of force incident within 72 hours. Body camera compliance hit 97% within the first year. Footage auto-uploaded to a secure third-party server, tamper-proof timestamps, random audits by the Federal Monitor. Use of force reports dropped 41% in the first 18 months. Complaints alleging racial profiling fell by more than half. Traffic stops in historically Black and Latino neighborhoods became noticeably more professional, fewer pretextual stops, quicker resolutions when they did occur. Trust metrics from annual community surveys began to creep upward for the first time in 2 decades. 4 months after the verdict, Lauren stood in Forest Park Cemetery in Houston. She placed fresh white lilies on 2 side-by-side headstones. Raymond Whitaker's granite marker was weathered, the dates etched deep. A life ended far too soon. Evelyn's white marble was still sharp-edged and new. Lauren knelt between them, one hand resting on each stone. She spoke quietly, the way she used to talk to them on Sunday afternoons. "I told the courtroom everything. About the stop when I was little, about the promise in the kitchen. About that night at the Shell station, about how it all connected. We won, Mama. Marcus Rivers got justice. The department is changing slowly, but it's changing. I kept the promise. Both of you can rest now." Marcus Rivers took his $620,000 compensatory award and put most of it toward reconstructive surgery on his jaw and cheekbone. The procedures restored some mobility and eased chronic pain. With the remainder, he paid off his house and enrolled in evening classes at Thurgood Marshall School of Law. His personal statement for admission centered on one question: what does civilian oversight really mean when the system has failed you for decades? He graduated 3 years later, passed the bar on his first attempt. Founded a nonprofit, Veterans Justice Initiative, offering pro bono legal help to former service members facing discrimination, excessive force claims, or wrongful arrests. The organization grew quickly, funded by grants, donations, and speaking fees. Within 5 years, it had offices in 3 Texas cities and had helped more than 400 veterans. Community policing shifted in subtle but measurable ways. Officers in certain precincts began attending monthly town halls without being ordered to. Traffic stops that once ended in tickets or arrests now more often ended with warnings or conversations. The word pretextual appeared in fewer incident reports. It wasn't perfect. Old habits died hard, resistance still simmered in some locker rooms, but the trajectory had changed. Lauren accepted appointment as the inaugural chair of the Civilian Oversight Board while keeping her full federal docket. She reviewed use of force packets late into the night, pushed for dashcam integration with body cams, testified before congressional committees on qualified immunity reform. The work was draining, endless meetings, pushback from unions, occasional death threats slipped under her door. But every small policy win felt like another piece of the promise kept. One crisp October evening, driving home from the Bob Casey courthouse, she passed the Shell station on a Minus 10. The pumps glowed under the canopy. A young Black man in a delivery uniform stood at Pump 4, filling a Honda Civic. A Harris County cruiser idled at Pump 2. The deputy inside sipped coffee from a to-go cup, glanced over once, casual, neutral, then looked away. No blocking maneuver, no slow roll-up. Just 2 people sharing the same well-lit space. Lauren kept driving. At home in her study, the Howard Law hoodie from that night hung in a simple black frame on the wall beside her judicial commission and her mother's gold cross. A small brass plate beneath the sweatshirt read, "For them, so no one else has to feel small." She opened her laptop. An email notification popped up. Marcus Rivers had written, his first semester grades posted. He'd made the dean's list. His note was short: "Thank you not just for the fair trial, but for showing what the law looks like when it's used the right way. Attached is the draft of my law review note. Narrowing qualified immunity in cases of systemic racial profiling. Would love your thoughts when you have a minute." Lauren smiled, typed a quick reply, "Congratulations, proud of you, sending edits soon," then closed the laptop. Tomorrow she had a sentencing hearing on a major wire fraud case, followed by an oversight board review of new de-escalation protocols. The docket never ended, neither did the work. She thought of the 10-year-old girl in the back of the pickup, watching her father's hands tremble as he handed over his ID. She thought of the promise made in a cramped kitchen. She thought of the judge who once believed the system could be forced to bend toward justice. One case, one precedent, one kept promise at a time. It wasn't enough. Not yet, not everywhere. But in this county, in these courtrooms, in the slow rewriting of policy and practice and accountability, things were moving. Lauren Whitaker did not become a crusader overnight. She had never been the type to chase headlines or give TED-style speeches. But the trial and everything it unearthed changed the rhythm of her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. The federal monitor appointed under the consent decree was a retired Third Circuit judge named Margaret Ellison. Sharp, no nonsense, 71 years old and still working 12-hour days. Ellison's first report, filed 6 months after the verdict, was brutal in its clarity. It documented persistent resistance in 3 precincts, delayed body cam activations, incomplete incident reports, supervisors who still referred to high-risk demographics in private memos. Within weeks, Ellison recommended the reassignment of 12 mid-level supervisors and the mandatory retraining of an entire shift. The sheriff complied. He had no choice. Lauren, as chair of the Civilian Oversight Board, attended every monthly meeting. She read every quarterly audit. She sat through hours of body cam review sessions where grainy footage showed officers de-escalating situations that 5 years earlier would have ended in force. She also read the complaints that still came in fewer, but sharper, more detailed from people who now believed their voices might actually matter. The work wore on her. Some nights she came home after 10 p.m., robe still in the dry cleaning bag over her shoulder, and sat in the dark study staring at the framed Howard hoodie on the wall. Grief for her parents arrived in unpredictable waves. The smell of hospital disinfectant on someone's coat, the sight of a Shell station sign, a song her mother used to hum while grading papers. She let the waves come. She had learned there was no shortcut through them. One afternoon in early spring, almost exactly a year after the trial, Sophia Morales called. "Lauren, you sitting down? Always am when you call." Marcus Rivers just got hired as an associate at a civil rights firm in Austin. They're letting him build out a police accountability practice. He wants you to keynote their first annual symposium. Topic: when the judge becomes the witness. He said, and I quote, "She showed me the law isn't just something you argue, it's something you live." Lauren laughed softly, the first real laugh in weeks. "Tell him I'll do it, but only if he introduces me and no PowerPoint full of my mugshot." Deal. The keynote became one of the most watched legal talks of the year. Lauren spoke for 40 minutes without notes. She didn't mention the Shell station until the final 5 minutes. When she did, the room went still. She described the cuffs, the laughter, the concrete bench, the slot in the door sliding open with the news of her mother's death. Then she described sitting on that bench and realizing, for the first time in her career, that the Constitution she had sworn to uphold had failed her in the most personal way possible. But it didn't fail forever, she said, because the same document that was violated that night is the one that allowed a jury to hold 2 deputies accountable. It's the one that let a federal court mandate reforms. It's imperfect, it's slow, it's been twisted and ignored for generations, but it can still be forced to bend toward justice. One case at a time, one promise kept at a time. The standing ovation lasted almost 3 minutes. Lauren stepped off the stage and hugged Marcus first. He whispered, "Thank you for showing up that morning." She whispered back, "Thank you for never giving up." Reform spread beyond Harris County. The Texas legislature, pressured by public opinion and several copycat lawsuits, passed the Police Transparency Act of 2026. It mandated statewide body cam standards, independent investigations for serious use of force incidents, and the public release of misconduct records after final adjudication. Qualified immunity protections were narrowed for cases involving clear constitutional violations. It wasn't everything advocates wanted, but it was more than anyone expected 5 years earlier. Lauren testified twice before House and Senate committees. Each time she wore the same small gold cross. Each time she ended with the same line, "The badge does not grant immunity from the Constitution. It demands obedience to it." Back in Houston, the Shell station on a -10 changed hands. The new owner installed brighter lights, added security cameras with public view monitors, and put up a small sign near the pumps. "All customers welcome 24/7. It was a tiny gesture, almost invisible, but Lauren noticed it every time she drove past. 2 years after the verdict, she received an unexpected package at the courthouse. No return address. Inside, a single Polaroid photo, slightly faded. It showed a much younger Michael Torres and Brandon Hayes, rookies still in academy haircuts, standing beside a patrol car. On the back, in shaky handwriting that looked like Hayes's, "I kept this to remember what I was before I forgot who I was supposed to be. I'm sorry for your father, for Marcus, for you that night. I'm trying to make it right now." Lauren stared at the photo for a long time. She didn't feel forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. But she felt something close to closure. She placed the photo in a drawer beside her mother's old hymn book. She didn't look at it again, but she didn't throw it away either. Life moved forward. She presided over a landmark immigration case that set new precedent on asylum credibility determinations. She mentored 2 new magistrates, one black, one Latina, who told her they applied because of her. She spoke at Evelyn's old church on the anniversary of her passing. The choir sang Amazing Grace, and Lauren let herself cry in the 3rd row for the first time in public. One quiet Saturday morning, she drove to the old family apartment on Chimney Rock, now a small community center. She sat on the steps where she and her mother used to talk after school. A group of kids played basketball across the street. A sheriff's cruiser rolled by slowly, waved at the kids, kept going. No lights, no siren, just routine patrol. Lauren stood, brushed off her jeans, and walked back to her car. She thought about the 9-year-old version of herself watching her father's hands shake during that long-ago stop. She thought about the promise made without words in a cramped kitchen. Things hadn't fixed themselves. Racism didn't vanish. Bad cops didn't disappear. Systems didn't reform themselves overnight. But the arc had bent just a little more in this one corner of the world, and that was enough to keep going. 5 years passed like pages turning in a very long legal brief, slow, deliberate, full of footnotes and occasional reversals on appeal. Lauren Whitaker turned 56 that spring. She still sat on the bench in the Bob Casey courthouse 4 days a week, still wore the same black robe pressed crisp every morning, still pinned her hair in the same neat bun. But something had quietly shifted in the way people looked at her when she walked the marble halls. Clerks straightened a little more. New attorneys asked for her advice without the usual deference bordering on fear. Even the marshals, many of whom remembered the viral video, nodded with something closer to respect than routine courtesy. The civilian oversight board she chaired had become a national model. Other counties than other states sent delegations to Houston to study its structure. They copied the subpoena power, the independent investigators, the mandatory 72-hour review of serious incidents. A bipartisan group in Congress invited Lauren to help draft federal legislation expanding similar boards nationwide. She testified remotely from her chambers one Tuesday afternoon, gold cross visible against her collar, voice as steady as ever. Accountability isn't punishment, she told the subcommittee. It's prevention. When officers know someone outside the chain of command is watching, really watching, the culture changes before the next stop ever happens. The bill passed in a lame duck session. It wasn't sweeping. It didn't end qualified immunity outright, but it created a federal grant program tied to oversight compliance, and within 18 months more than 200 jurisdictions had applied. Marcus Rivers, now a senior associate at the Austin firm, argued his first case before the Fifth Circuit that same year. The issue: whether body cam footage could be withheld from discovery in excessive force suits under a new state privacy exemption. He won unanimously. Afterward, he texted Lauren a single photo. Him standing outside the John Minor Wisdom Federal Courthouse in New Orleans, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, smiling the way people smile when they've carried something heavy for a long time and finally set it down. Veterans Justice Initiative had offices in Dallas, San Antonio, and Atlanta by then. They'd helped more than 1,200 former service members, many with stories that echoed Marcus's own. One of their signature programs paired veterans with law students for mock trials focused on constitutional rights during police encounters. Lauren guest-judged one session via Zoom. When a young vet asked her off-script, "How do you keep going after what they did to you that night?" she answered without hesitation, "Because someone has to show the next generation that the system can be repaired, even if it takes your whole life to do it." The Shell station on Amina's 10 changed again. The owner retired. A young couple from Katy bought it and turned the convenience store into a small cafe serving locally roasted coffee and pastries. They kept the sign near the pumps. All customers welcome 24/7. They added outdoor seating and free Wi-Fi. On weekends, families stopped there. Deputies on break sat at the tables sometimes, no tension in the air. Lauren drove past one Sunday morning on her way to church. A black family, parents and 2 teenagers stood at Pump 3, laughing about something on a phone. A Harris County cruiser pulled in behind them, parked normally. Officers stepped out to pay inside. No blocking, no slow cruise, just Saturday morning normal. She didn't stop, she didn't need to. But she felt the knot that had lived in her chest since she was 10 years old loosen, just a fraction more. That same year, the High School Mock Trial Association invited her to judge the national finals in Atlanta. The case involved racial profiling and excessive force. The students had clearly drawn inspiration from news coverage of her trial. During debrief, one of the competitors, a black senior from Chicago, approached her. "Judge Whitaker, I read about what happened to you. My mom showed me the video when I was in middle school. She said, "See, even when they try to make you small, you can still stand tall. I want to be a judge someday." Because of you, Lauren looked at the young woman, bright eyes, steady voice, and felt her mother's presence so strongly she almost turned to look for her. "Then stand tall," Lauren said. "And when it's hard, remember the promise you're keeping isn't just for yourself, it's for everyone who came before you." The girl hugged her. Lauren hugged back. Neither of them cried, but both came close. Back in Houston, life settled into a new ordinary. Lauren still rose at 5:30 a.m., still read case law over coffee, still visited the cemetery twice a month with fresh flowers. She framed Marcus's Law Review article, the one he'd sent her years earlier, beside the Howard hoodie. The brass plate now read 2 lines. For them, so no one else has to feel small. For the next, so they never have to prove they belong. One evening in late fall, she sat on her back porch with a glass of red wine, watching the sky turn colors she hadn't noticed in years. Her phone buzzed. An email from the federal monitor's office. Harris County had achieved full compliance with every reform mandate 2 years ahead of schedule. The monitor recommended terminating the decree early. Lauren read the attached report twice. Then she set the phone down, leaned back, and for the first time in decades, let herself simply breathe without carrying the next fight. She thought of her father's steady voice during that long-ago traffic stop. She thought of her mother's arms around her in the kitchen. She thought of the concrete bench in the holding cell, the slot sliding open, the words that broke her and rebuilt her at the same time. Nothing was perfect. New scandals would come. New resistance would rise. The work would never truly end. But the promise, first whispered to a scared child, then carried through law school, then defended on a federal bench, had been kept. Not just for her parents. Not just for Marcus Rivers. For every person who would never have to endure what they endured. And that was enough. 10 years after the night at the Shell station, Lauren Whitaker still drove past it every few weeks on her way between the courthouse and home. The place looked almost unrecognizable now, not because of dramatic renovation, but because of ordinary wear and quiet evolution. The cafe inside had expanded into a small community gathering spot. Weekend poetry readings, voter registration drives, even occasional town hall meetups with local law enforcement. The sign by the pump still read, "All customers welcome, 24/7. But no one paid it much attention anymore. It had become background truth rather than a statement that needed to be made. Lauren was 61. She had taken senior status on the bench 2 years earlier, still hearing a reduced caseload of the most complex civil rights and constitutional matters, still mentoring clerks who arrived wide-eyed and left quoting her opinions verbatim. The Civilian Oversight Board had long since outgrown its original charter. She stepped down as chair after 8 years but remained an emeritus advisor. The federal monitor's office had closed its Houston satellite years ago. The consent decree terminated early, compliance sustained without court supervision. She never stopped working entirely. Some habits don't retire. One crisp February morning, almost to the day 10 years since that 2:41 a.m. hospital call, she received an invitation in the mail, not email. Actual paper, cream envelope, embossed return address from the White House. The President of the United States requested the honor of her presence at a ceremony honoring individuals whose courage and service have advanced the cause of justice and equality under the law. The Presidential Medal of Freedom. Lauren read the letter twice, then set it on the kitchen table beside her coffee. She didn't call anyone right away. She just sat there for 20 minutes tracing the gold seal with her fingertip. The ceremony was held on a bright spring day in the East Room. Lauren wore a simple navy dress, the same small gold cross, no robe. When her name was called, the room stood. She walked to the podium slowly, shook the president's hand, accepted the medal on its blue ribbon. The citation was read aloud. Lauren Whitaker, federal magistrate judge, whose personal encounter with injustice became the catalyst for sweeping reforms in law enforcement accountability. Through unflinching testimony, principled rulings, and tireless service on civilian oversight bodies, she helped bend the arc of one community, and then many toward justice that is not only promised but delivered. Afterward, at the reception, Marcus Rivers found her near the windows overlooking the South Lawn. He was 52 now, partner at his firm, gray at the temples, still carrying himself with that soldier's posture. His nonprofit had just opened its 10th office in Washington, D.C. "Judge," he said, voice thick, "I didn't think I'd ever see this day." Lauren looked at him, really looked, and smiled the way her mother used to smile when she was proud. "You earned more of this than I did, Marcus." He shook his head. "We both know that night at the Shell station changed everything. But you were the one who walked into that courtroom 38 hours later and didn't flinch. That's what I tell every veteran who walks through our doors. Sometimes the fight starts when they think they've already won. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching people move through the room, senators, activists, families, young lawyers who looked too young to remember the viral video. Lauren spoke quietly. "Do you ever drive past that Shell station? Every time I'm in Houston, I don't stop, I just look. And I remember," she nodded. "Me too." Back in Houston the following week, Lauren did something she hadn't done in years. She took a full day off. No docket, no meetings, no emails. She drove to Forest Park Cemetery in the late afternoon. The headstones were side by side as always, Raymond's granite softened by time, Evelyn's marble still bright. She placed 2 small bouquets, white roses for her mother, sunflowers for her father. She knelt, touched each stone in turn. "I got the medal," she said aloud. "They called it the Medal of Freedom, but you two know the truth. The only freedom that ever mattered was the kind you promised me I could help make real. I tried, I'm still trying. And it's working, not everywhere, not perfectly, but enough that kids growing up now don't have to carry the same weight we did." A breeze moved through the oaks. Somewhere nearby, children laughed on the playground across the road. Lauren stood, brushed grass from her knees, and walked back to her car. She didn't cry. She hadn't needed to for a long time. That evening she sat in her study, the framed Howard hoodie on the wall catching the last of the daylight. The second brass plate still read, "For them, so no one else has to feel small. For the next, so they never have to prove they belong." She opened her laptop one last time that day. A new email from a former clerk, now a district judge herself. "Judge Whitaker, oral arguments tomorrow on a qualified immunity case. The plaintiff's attorney cited your concurrence from 2028 3 times in the brief. Thought you'd want to know. We're still fighting the good fight because you showed us how." Lauren typed back, "Tell them to keep citing it and keep winning." She closed the laptop, turned off the desk lamp, and sat in the quiet dark for a while. Outside, the city moved on cars on a -10, people at pumps, deputies on patrol, families laughing in the cafe that used to be just a gas station. The promise hadn't been broken. It had been passed forward. One courtroom, one reform, one kept word at a time. And somewhere in that long chain of small, stubborn acts of justice, a little girl who once sat terrified in the back of a pickup finally got to see what her parents always believed was possible. The system didn't just bend. In places, it began to heal.